I think I didn't do anything wrong, just made a mistake after a few too many drinks. But now I'm staring at divorce papers, and everyone acts like I'm the villain. All I did was mess up one night. Why is my whole life coming apart for that? The morning light filtered through our bedroom curtains as I watched Elliot get dressed for work, his movements mechanical and distant. 3 weeks had passed since that night at Murphy's bar, and I was desperate to return to normal. It was just one stupid mistake. Why couldn't he see that? Coffee's ready, I called out, forcing brightness into my voice as I headed downstairs to our kitchen. Our 7-year-old daughter Ella was already at the table, picking at her cereal while glancing nervously between us. Elliot appeared in the doorway, his accountant's precision evident even in how he straightened his tie. "Thanks," he said flatly, pouring himself a cup without looking at me. "So I was thinking," I began, loading the dishwasher with exaggerated domesticity. "Maybe we could do something fun this weekend. Take Ella to that new arcade she's been talking about." "Maybe," his tone suggested otherwise. I felt frustration bubbling up. This silent treatment was getting ridiculous. "Elliot, come on. We can't keep walking on eggshells forever. It was one night, one mistake. People have fights. They drink too much. They do stupid things. That's what happened." He finally looked at me, his brown eyes holding an expression I couldn't quite read. "Is that what you call it? A stupid thing?" "What else would I call it?" I shot back, then caught myself. Ella was listening. I softened my voice. "Look, I know you're hurt, but I was drunk. I was upset about our fight. And yes, I made a poor decision. But it didn't mean anything. Damien and I were just never good. Don't." Elliot's voice cut through my explanation. "Not in front of Ella." My daughter looked between us with those wide, worried eyes that made my chest tighten. This was exactly why I needed Elliot to get over this. Our family was falling apart over nothing. After Elliot left for work and I dropped Ella at school, I called my mother, Janet Rivers. She answered on the second ring, her familiar voice immediately soothing. "Honey, how are you holding up?" "Mom, I don't know what to do. Elliot is being so dramatic about this whole thing. He won't even have a real conversation with me." "Well, sweetheart, you know how men can be about their pride, but everyone makes mistakes. The important thing is that you're sorry and you want to work on your marriage." Exactly. I felt validated hearing someone finally make sense. That's all I've been trying to tell him. But his mother, Linda, keeps calling, and I know she's poisoning him against me. "Linda Price always thought she was better than everyone else," Mom said with a sniff. "Don't you let her make you feel ashamed for being human." But even as I hung up feeling better, I couldn't shake the memory of Elliot's face that morning. There had been something calculating in his silence, something that made me uneasy. That evening, as I was folding laundry in our bedroom, Elliot appeared in the doorway holding his phone. "Serafina, who's been texting you from a number I don't recognize." My blood chilled, but I kept my voice light. "What do you mean? Your phone buzzed earlier. The preview showed a message that just said, 'Thinking about you,' from a number not in your contacts." I laughed, hoping it sounded natural. "Oh, that's probably just a wrong number. You know how it is, spam texts, marketing stuff. I get random messages all the time." Elliot studied my face for a long moment. "Right, spam. Elliot, seriously, you're being paranoid. This is what I mean. You're looking for problems where there aren't any." He nodded slowly, but something in his expression told me he didn't believe a word I'd said. As he turned to leave, I felt the first real flutter of panic in my chest. The next day at work, I found myself venting to my coworker and friend Leah Torres during our lunch break. We sat in the small break room of the insurance office, where I worked as a manager, picking at salads while I tried to make sense of my situation. "I just don't understand why he's making such a big deal out of this," I said, stabbing at a cherry tomato. "I mean, yes, I slept with Damien, but it was one night, I was drunk, and honestly, Elliot had been so distant and boring lately. We hadn't been intimate in weeks. A woman has needs, you know." Leah shifted uncomfortably. "Sarah, I get that you were unhappy, but Damien is Elliot's best friend. That's pretty intense." "Was his best friend," I corrected. "And honestly, maybe this is a wake-up call for Elliot. Maybe now he'll realize he needs to put more effort into our marriage instead of just coming home, eating dinner and falling asleep watching Netflix." "But cheating, though." "It wasn't cheating." The words came out sharper than I intended. "Cheating implies intent, planning. This was just a moment of weakness, a mistake. There's a difference." I could see Leah wasn't entirely convinced, so I pulled out my phone, and showed her the group chat I'd started with a few of our coworkers. Look, I've been trying to get perspective on this. Everyone agrees that Elliot is overreacting. I scrolled through the messages I'd sent the night before. Husband is having a meltdown because I had a few drinks and made out with someone, acting like I committed murder or something. Men are so dramatic. Of course, I'd left out the part about it being his best friend, and the part about it being more than making out. Leah read over the responses, mostly supportive emojis and comments about men being sensitive, but her expression remained troubled. Sarah, are you sure you're telling the whole story? Because if Elliot is this upset, Elliot is upset because his ego is bruised, I interrupted. He can't handle the fact that maybe, just maybe, he hasn't been the perfect husband he thinks he is. That evening, I decided to stop by Murphy's bar after work. I told myself I was just getting a drink to unwind, but if I was honest, I was hoping to run into Damien. We needed to get our story straight. The bar was dimly lit and smelled of stale beer and fried food. I spotted Damien immediately. He was hard to miss with his gym instructor physique and that mess of dark hair that had felt so good between my fingers 3 weeks ago. But when he saw me approaching, his face went pale. Sarah, what are you doing here? Getting a drink. Is that a crime? I slid onto the bar stool next to him, noting how he immediately shifted away. Relax, Damien. We're allowed to be in the same place. We're friends, remember? Are we? He wouldn't meet my eyes. Because Elliot came to see me yesterday. My stomach dropped. What did he say? He asked if I'd been texting you, if we'd been spending time together. Damien's voice was barely above a whisper. Sarah, I think he knows. He doesn't know anything, I said firmly. He's fishing, grasping at straws because he's insecure. Maybe we should just tell him the truth. I feel terrible about this. He's been my best friend since college, and you what? Had a few drinks and hooked up with someone? Big deal. It happens. I leaned closer, lowering my voice. Damien, listen to me. This doesn't have to ruin anyone's life. It was one night. We were both drunk, we both made a mistake, and now it's over. Unless you make it into something bigger than it needs to be. He finally looked at me, and I could see the conflict in his eyes. But the lying, it's not lying. It's protecting everyone involved, including Elliot. Do you really think he'd be happier knowing the details? Sometimes the kindest thing is to let sleeping dogs lie. I could see I was getting through to him, so I pressed my advantage. Besides, what exactly would you tell him? That you seduced his wife? That you pursued me for weeks before I finally gave in? That's not what happened, isn't it? You were the one buying me drinks that night. You were the one suggesting we go somewhere more private. I was vulnerable, going through a rough patch in my marriage, and you took advantage of that. The look of hurt and confusion on his face almost made me feel guilty. Almost. I didn't think of it that way. Well, that's how it would look to everyone else, including Elliot. I softened my tone, reaching out to touch his arm. Look, I'm not trying to make you the bad guy here. We both made choices that night, but we can also both choose to move forward and not let one mistake destroy 2 families. Damien nodded slowly, but he still looked troubled as I left the bar. Driving home, I felt more in control than I had in weeks. Elliot might be suspicious, but suspicion wasn't proof. And now Damien understood the importance of keeping quiet. But as I pulled into my driveway, my phone buzzed with a text from Damien. We need to talk. Elliot knows. My hands shook as I stared at the message. Whatever confidence I'd built up at the bar evaporated instantly. The family dinner at Romano's was supposed to be a peace offering. My mother had suggested it. A neutral, public place where we could all sit down like adults and work through this misunderstanding. I'd convinced myself that if I could just get Elliot in front of our families, show everyone how he was overreacting, the social pressure would force him to back down. I was wrong. We sat around a large circular table. Me, Elliot, Ella, both our mothers, and Elliot's younger brother Tristan, who'd driven up from the city for the dinner. The tension was so thick you could cut it with a knife. So, I began brightly, cutting into my chicken parmesan. Isn't this nice? We should do family dinners more often. Linda Price, Elliot's mother, gave me a look that could freeze hell over. At 60, she still carried herself with the stern authority of the high school principal she'd been for 30 years. Yes, it's lovely when families can come together during difficult times. The emphasis she put on difficult made it clear she blamed me entirely for whatever was happening. Oh, come now, Linda, my mother interjected, her voice artificially sweet. Every marriage has its rough patches. The important thing is working through them together. Some rough patches are more serious than others, Janet. I felt my temper flaring. You know what? I think we need to address the elephant in the room here. I looked directly at Elliot, who had barely touched his food. Elliot, you've been giving me the silent treatment for weeks over something that was basically nothing. Don't you think it's time to forgive and move on? Nothing, Tristan spoke up, his voice sharp. At 28, he looked like a younger version of his brother, but with none of Elliot's quiet patience. Sarah, you slept with his best friend. Tristan, Elliot said quietly, glancing at Ella, who was pushing food around her plate with wide, frightened eyes. No, it's fine, I said, my voice rising. Let's talk about it. Yes, I made a mistake. I had too much to drink. I was feeling neglected in my marriage, and I did something stupid. But you know what? Maybe if my husband paid half as much attention to me as he does to his spreadsheets, it never would have happened. The restaurant seemed to go quiet around us. I could feel other diners turning to look, but I was past caring. Are you seriously blaming Elliot for your cheating? Linda's voice was ice cold. I'm saying that marriages are complicated, and when one person checks out emotionally, sometimes the other person makes poor choices. I looked at Elliot, willing him to engage, to defend himself, to show some emotion. We used to talk, Elliot. We used to go out, have fun, be intimate. When was the last time you planned a date night? When was the last time you told me I looked beautiful? Mommy? Ella's small voice cut through my speech. Are you and Daddy getting divorced? The question hung in the air like a bomb. I felt tears spring to my eyes, partly from genuine emotion, partly because I knew how it would look. Oh, sweetheart, no, I said, reaching for her hand. Mommy and Daddy are just having a grown-up disagreement. Sometimes adults say things they don't mean when they're upset. I looked meaningfully at Elliot, but he was staring at his plate. Daddy? Ella turned to her father. Are you upset with Mommy? Elliot finally looked up, and when he met his daughter's eyes, his expression softened for the first time in weeks. I'm not upset with you, baby girl, and whatever happens between Mommy and me, we both love you very much. That will never change. Whatever happens, I felt panic rising in my chest. Elliot, what does that mean? But he was already standing, pulling out his wallet. I think we should go. This isn't the place for this conversation. No, we're not done talking, I said. But Linda was already standing too, her face flushed with anger. We most certainly are done, she said. Serafina, I have watched you manipulate and gaslight my son for weeks, and I will not sit here and watch you do it in front of his daughter. Gaslight? Are you kidding me? I'm the one trying to save our family while he sulks like a teenager. You destroyed this family the night you decided to sleep with his best friend, Tristan said, standing as well. And now you want to blame everyone else for the consequences. Consequences? I was crying now, but whether from hurt or rage, I couldn't tell. It was one mistake, one night. Why is everyone acting like I'm some kind of monster? But they were already leaving. Linda took Ella's hand while Elliot gathered their coats. My mother sat frozen, clearly overwhelmed by the scene. Elliot, please, I called after him. Don't do this. Don't let your family turn you against me. We can work through this if you just... He turned back to me, and for a moment I thought I'd gotten through to him. But his expression was calm, almost pitying. Sarah, I'm not angry anymore. I'm just done. As they left the restaurant, I sat there with my mother, feeling the stares of other diners, my face burning with humiliation. My phone buzzed with a text from Damien. We need to talk. Elliot knows. The message I'd been dreading for weeks had finally come, and I realized that my carefully constructed narrative was about to crumble completely. Damien's apartment was a typical bachelor pad. Minimalist furniture, protein powder containers on the kitchen counter, and the lingering smell of gym equipment. I'd been here twice before, once 3 weeks ago when everything went wrong, and once the week after when I'd convinced myself we needed to talk through what happened. Now, sitting on his black leather couch while he paced nervously in front of me, I could see that my control over the situation was slipping. Elliot came to see me at the gym today, Damien said without preamble. He didn't accuse me of anything directly, but the questions he asked, Sarah, he knows. He knows everything. What kind of questions? I kept my voice steady, but my heart was racing. He asked if I'd been to Murphy's bar on the night of March 15th. He asked if I'd given you a ride home. He asked if we'd been in contact since then. Damien ran his hands through his hair, and then he just looked at me with this expression like he was disappointed but not surprised. So what did you tell him? I told him the truth. The words hit me like a slap. You what? I told him yes, we were at the bar together. Yes, I gave you a ride. And yes, we've talked since then. Damien finally stopped pacing and looked at me. Sierra, I can't keep lying to my best friend. This is killing me. I stood up, moving closer to him. Damien, listen to me. You need to think about what you're doing here. If you tell Elliot everything, you're not just hurting him, you're destroying our friendship, my marriage, and my daughter's family. Is that really what you want? Of course not, but then you need to stick to the story we agreed on. We were at the bar. You gave me a ride home because I was too drunk to drive, and that's it. End of story. But that's not what happened. It's close enough to what happened. The rest is just details that would hurt people unnecessarily. Damien shook his head. Sarah, we slept together, multiple times. That's not a detail, that's the whole point. Multiple times, I forced a laugh. Damien, we hooked up once when we were both drunk and made a mistake. Don't make it sound like we were having some kind of affair. The look he gave me was a mixture of confusion and hurt. What are you talking about? We've been meeting here for weeks. We've been texting every day. Just yesterday you said, I said what? That I enjoyed our friendship? That I appreciated having someone to talk to during a difficult time in my marriage? I could see I was losing him, so I switched tactics. Look, I know you might have developed feelings, and I'm sorry if I gave you the wrong impression. But what happened between us was a mistake, and continuing to see each other was just me trying to make sure you were okay with everything. That's not how I remember it. Well, maybe your memory is colored by wishful thinking. The words came out harsher than I intended, and I saw him flinch. Damien, I'm married. I love my husband. What happened between us was a moment of weakness during a rough patch in my marriage. Nothing more. He stared at me for a long moment, and I could see him trying to reconcile my words with his memories of the past few weeks. The late-night texts, the afternoon visits, the things I'd whispered in his ear just days ago. So what are you saying? That I imagined all of this? I'm saying that maybe you read more into our friendship than was actually there. And maybe that's my fault for not being clearer about boundaries. But Damien, if you care about me at all, you won't destroy my family over a misunderstanding. My phone rang, interrupting the tense silence. Elliot's name appeared on the screen, and I felt a chill run down my spine. Don't answer it, Damien said quickly, but I was already swiping to accept. Hi, honey. Serafina. Elliot's voice was calm, professional. I need you to come home. We have some things to discuss. Of course. I'm just running some errands. I'll be home in an hour. Where are you right now? The question was casual, but something in his tone made my stomach clench. Just out, shopping. You know how it is. Right. Well, when you get home, we need to talk about our finances. And about Ella's custody arrangements. Custody arrangements? Elliot, what are you talking about? But the line was already dead. I looked at Damien, who had gone pale during my conversation. He knows where you are, he said quietly. Don't be ridiculous. How could he possibly? My phone buzzed with a text message from Elliot. It was a photo of Damien's apartment building, taken from the parking lot. Below it, a simple message. We need to talk. I stared at the photo, my hands shaking. In the corner of the image, I could just make out my car parked in visitor parking. Oh God, I whispered. Damien was already moving toward the window, peering through the blinds. There's a car across the street. I think he's been watching. The full weight of the situation hit me like a freight train. Elliot wasn't just suspicious, he was gathering evidence, and I'd walked right into his trap. This is your fault, I said, whirling on Damien. If you hadn't panicked, if you just stuck to our story. Our story? Sierra, there is no our story. There's just the truth, and the truth is that we've been having an affair for weeks. It wasn't an affair. It was a mistake that got complicated. But even as I said the words, I could hear how hollow they sounded. Standing in Damien's apartment, having been caught in yet another lie, I finally had to confront the reality I'd been avoiding. I wasn't the victim here. I wasn't even the person making understandable mistakes. I was exactly what everyone said I was. And now Elliot had proof. The law office of Patterson and Associates was exactly what I'd expected. All dark wood paneling and leather-bound books, designed to intimidate. I sat across from Elliot at a polished conference table, our respective attorneys flanking us like seconds in a duel. 3 days had passed since the confrontation at Damien's apartment. 3 days of Elliot sleeping in the guest room, speaking to me only when necessary, and making phone calls behind closed doors. 3 days of me trying desperately to salvage a situation that was spiraling completely out of control. Mrs. Price, Elliot's attorney, a sharp-faced woman named Margaret Chen, opened a manila folder, and spread its contents across the table. Your husband has asked us to present you with evidence that he's gathered regarding your extramarital activities. I forced myself to look at the documents, even as my stomach churned. Text message screenshots, bank statements showing charges at hotels I'd claimed were work meetings, credit card receipts from restaurants where I'd supposedly been eating alone, and photos. Photos of me entering Damien's apartment building. Photos of us at Murphy's bar, sitting closer than friends should sit. Photos of us in his car, my hand on his thigh. This is stalking, I said, my voice shakier than I wanted it to be. You can't just follow someone around taking pictures. Actually, Mrs. Price, a spouse has every legal right to investigate suspected infidelity. My own attorney, a tired-looking man named Robert Walsh, said quietly. Especially when it involves marital assets and child custody. Margaret Chen continued laying out the evidence like a prosecutor building a case. We also have testimony from Mr. Brooks, who has provided a detailed account of his relationship with Mrs. Price, including dates, times, and locations of their encounters. Damien talked to you. I looked at Elliot for the first time since we'd sat down. He was studying the documents with the same focused attention he brought to his accounting work, but I could see the tension in his jaw. He came to see me yesterday, Elliot said without looking up. He wanted to apologize and to tell me the truth about what's been going on. What truth? There's no truth to tell because nothing happened. Well, words came out automatically, but even I could hear how desperate they sounded. Margaret Chen slid another document across the table, a signed statement from Damien, detailing our affair with painful specificity. According to Mr. Brooks, she said, your relationship began on March 15th and has continued regularly since then. He's provided dates, text message records, and details about your meetings at his apartment. I scanned Damien's statement, feeling betrayed and furious. He'd told them everything, not just about the night at Murphy's, but about all the afternoons I'd spent at his place, all the messages we'd exchanged, all the things I'd said about my marriage and about Elliot. He's lying, I said, but my voice lacked conviction. Or he's confused. Maybe he wanted something more to happen than actually did. Maybe he's trying to make our friendship sound like something it wasn't. Serafina. Elliot finally looked at me, and his expression was almost gentle. Please stop. Stop what? Stop defending myself against lies? Stop lying. His voice was quiet but firm. To them, to me, to yourself. Just stop. Wibney fell silent. I could feel everyone watching me, waiting for my response. Part of me wanted to keep fighting, keep denying, keep spinning the narrative in my favor. But looking at Elliot's face, seeing the exhaustion and sadness there instead of anger, something inside me finally cracked. It wasn't supposed to happen, I whispered. Margaret Chen leaned forward. What wasn't supposed to happen, Mrs. Price? Any of it. The first night, I was drunk and angry after a fight with Elliot. Damien was there. He was listening. He was available. It was supposed to be a one-time mistake. But it wasn't one time. No, the word came out as barely a breath. It wasn't. My attorney shot me a warning look, but I was past caring about legal strategy. I kept telling myself it didn't mean anything, that it was just stress relief, a way to feel wanted again. Elliot and I had been growing apart, and Damien made me feel attractive, desirable. It was like a drug. So you admit to having an ongoing affair with your husband's best friend, Margaret Chen said, making notes. I admit to making a series of terrible decisions that hurt everyone I care about. I looked at Elliot again, including myself. For a moment, I thought I saw something soften in his expression. But then Margaret Chen was sliding more papers across the table. Mr. Price is filing for divorce on grounds of adultery. He's also seeking primary custody of your daughter, based on questions about your judgment and stability. Primary custody? The words hit me like a physical blow. Elliot, you can't take Ella away from me. She's my daughter. She's our daughter, he said quietly. And she's been asking me why Mommy is always upset, why we don't eat dinner together anymore, why you disappear for hours at a time without explanation. I would never do anything to hurt Ella. You already have. Every lie you've told, every time you've chosen to be with Damien instead of coming home to your family, every time you've made her feel like she's walking on eggshells because Mommy and Daddy are fighting. You've already hurt her. The truth of his words was devastating. I thought about Ella's worried face at the restaurant, the way she'd been clinging to Elliot lately, the questions she'd stopped asking because she was afraid of the answers. I can change, I said desperately. Elliot, if you'll just give me another chance, I can fix this. I can be better. He was quiet for a long moment, and I held my breath, hoping against hope that maybe, somehow, I could still salvage this. "Sarah," he said finally, "I don't think you even know who you are anymore, and I can't keep pretending that love is enough to fix that." Margaret Chen cleared her throat. "Mrs. Price, your husband is prepared to offer joint custody with a 60-40 split in his favor, provided you agree to certain conditions regarding your relationship with Mr. Brooks and your living arrangements." I looked at the divorce papers, at the custody agreement, at the evidence of my own destruction spread across the polished table. 6 months ago, I'd been a wife and mother with a stable life and a family who loved me. Now I was sitting in a lawyer's office, fighting for the right to see my own daughter. "Where do I sign?" I whispered. The family courthouse was nothing like the dramatic courtrooms you see on TV. It was a bland, bureaucratic space, with fluorescent lighting and uncomfortable chairs, where the most important decisions of people's lives were made with the same procedural efficiency as renewing a driver's license. I sat at one table with Robert Walsh, while Elliot sat at another with Margaret Chen. Between us, a family court judge named Patricia Morrison reviewed our case file with the weary expression of someone who'd seen too many marriages die in this room. The past month had been a nightmare of depositions, mediation sessions, and legal paperwork. Every detail of my affair had been dissected, analyzed, and entered into the official record. Damien had been deposed. My coworkers had been questioned. Even the bartender at Murphy's had provided a statement about the night everything started. Through it all, I'd tried to maintain some version of my original story, that I was a woman who'd made a mistake during a difficult time in her marriage, not a calculating adulteress who'd betrayed her family. But the evidence was overwhelming, and my attempts to minimize or rationalize my behavior had only made things worse. "Mrs. Price," Judge Morrison said, looking at me over her reading glasses, "I've reviewed the testimony and evidence in this case, including your own statements. Do you have anything you'd like to add before I make my ruling on custody arrangements?" I stood on shaky legs, knowing this was my last chance to advocate for myself. "Your Honor, I know I made terrible mistakes. I know I hurt my husband and my daughter, and I take full responsibility for that. But I love my daughter more than anything in this world, and I'm committed to being a better mother and a better person going forward." "Mrs. Price, during your deposition, you stated that your affair was the result of feeling emotionally neglected in your marriage. Do you still maintain that your husband's behavior contributed to your decision to have an extramarital relationship?" I felt a flash of my old defensiveness, the urge to explain how Elliot's distance and routine had made me feel invisible, how a woman could only take so much loneliness before she looked elsewhere for connection. But then I caught sight of Ella in the gallery, sitting between my mother and Linda Price, her small face serious and worried. She was wearing the blue dress I'd bought her for school pictures, and her hair was in the French braid that Elliot had learned to do when I was too busy or distracted to help her get ready in the mornings. "No, Your Honor," I said quietly. "My affair was the result of my own poor choices. Whatever problems existed in my marriage, cheating wasn't the solution. It just made everything worse." Judge Morrison nodded and made a note. "Mr. Price, do you have anything to add?" Elliot stood, and for a moment I thought he might say something harsh, might finally express the anger I knew he had to be feeling. Instead, his voice was measured and sad. "Your Honor, I just want what's best for our daughter. Ella loves her mother, and I would never want to damage that relationship. I'm not seeking to punish Serafina. I'm seeking stability and honesty for our child." The judge spent several minutes reviewing her notes before delivering her ruling. "In the matter of custody, I'm awarding joint legal custody to both parents, with Mr. Price having primary physical custody. Mrs. Price will have visitation every other weekend and one evening per week, with the possibility of revisiting this arrangement after 6 months if both parties agree." The words hit me like a physical blow. I'd known this was likely, but hearing it made official was devastating. "Regarding the divorce decree, I'm granting the dissolution of marriage on grounds of adultery. Mr. Price will retain the marital home and primary custody of the minor child. Mrs. Price will receive her portion of marital assets, as outlined in the settlement agreement." As the judge continued reading the terms of my new reality, I felt something inside me finally break completely. Not my heart, that had been broken for weeks, but my last remaining illusion that I could somehow emerge from this situation as anything other than exactly what I was, a woman who had destroyed her own life through selfishness and poor choices. After the hearing, I found myself standing on the courthouse steps while Elliot walked away with Ella's hand in his. My daughter had hugged me goodbye, but it was a polite, careful hug, the kind you give to a relative you don't see very often. Serafina, a voice said behind me. I turned to see Damien approaching, looking as miserable as I felt. What do you want? I asked wearily. I wanted to apologize for testifying against you. I know it made things worse. I studied his face, this man who had been my escape, my validation, my partner in destroying everything I'd once held dear. You know what, Damien? You did the right thing. For once in this whole mess, someone told the truth. He looked surprised. I thought you'd be angry. I am angry. At you, at Elliot, at the lawyers, at everyone who couldn't just let me handle this quietly. I paused, feeling the weight of the past few months settling on my shoulders. But mostly I'm angry at myself. For the affair, for thinking I could have the affair without consequences, for believing my own lies for so long that I forgot what the truth even looked like. Damien shifted uncomfortably. So what happens now? I looked down the courthouse steps, where Elliot was helping Ella into his car. My former life was driving away, and I was standing here with the man who'd helped me destroy it. Now I have to figure out how to live with what I've done, I said. And you have to figure out how to live with what you've done. Maybe we could… No! I cut him off before he could finish the thought. Whatever this was between us, it's over. It should have been over before it started. As I walked to my car, I caught sight of my reflection in the courthouse windows. I looked older, harder, like a woman I didn't recognize. The Serafina who had walked into Murphy's bar 3 months ago. The one who thought she deserved better, who believed her happiness justified any means of achieving it, was gone. In her place was someone who would have to learn to live with the consequences of her choices. Someone who would have to rebuild relationships with her daughter, her family, and herself from the ground up. Someone who finally understood that calling something a mistake doesn't erase the damage it causes. I got in my car and drove to my new apartment, a small, lonely place that smelled like fresh paint and broken dreams. Tomorrow, I would start the long process of trying to become a person my daughter could be proud of again. But tonight, for the first time in months, I was going to stop lying to myself about who I really was and what I had really done. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Madam, October 11th, 2025, 17 hours, 26 minutes, and 38 seconds.